wearing a mask outdoors really does anything whatsoever. If you keep a couple of feet away from someone else, that's my opinion. I want to point out this article here. This is Dr. Scott Atlas, who has become top-level health advisor to Donald Trump. He had a video that was pulled on YouTube where he was doing an interview with, I think it was the Hoover Institute, on his philosophy of, not wearing a mask and his argument essentially for reopening the economy. I think that was his main thing. And talking about how, yes, kids can transmit the disease, but at a lower rate than adults. That video was pulled when it achieved, I think, like 750,000 views. It is now available on YouTube. Let me just show you here. They put it back up, and the video's gotten, I think, like 40,000 views. But with this note, and I'm going to read this. I think this is quite interesting. On September 11, 2020, YouTube removed this episode of Uncommon Knowledge with Peter Robinson and Dr. Scott Atlas and notified the Hoover Institution that the video, quote, violates our guidelines. The takedown notice further explained that YouTube does not allow content, listen carefully to this, does not allow content that spreads medical misinformation that contradicts the World Health Organization or local health authorities' medical information about COVID-19, including on methods to prevent, treat, or diagnose COVID-19 and means of transmission. In order to reinstate the interview on their platform, YouTube required the Hoover Institution to add the following disclaimer to two portions of the interview. Quote, prevailing medical consensus could suggest that children can transmit the disease but at a lower rate than adults. End quote. While we disagree with YouTube's interpretation of what Dr. Atlas said in the video, we have complied with this request to make the video available to viewers. It's just like you have to go along to get along. Again, YouTube's been, the ultimate finger-wagging schoolmarm nanny for a while now. They've dinged a lot of my videos. God forbid I talk about any kind of, politically controversial topic whatsoever without them either demonetizing. I haven't had any videos pulled off YouTube, so I'm glad about that. But other people have, and I've just been, it's just that I'm cowed enough by them that I just don't want to test the censor, and the answer is yes. I don't really want to fight them on this. It's one reason I go to my website at Richard Menendez, where I'm absolutely able to talk much more freely to the people who go to that website. And if you're really wondering, like I saw one comment when I scrolling up here, like, holy shit, Dolan's alive. Yes, I'm alive. I'm doing just fine, and I'm very active on my website at Richard Members, where I have a lot more freedom to talk about the things that are important to me. So if you want to follow what I'm doing, that's really the place to go. And, I'm sorry to disappoint you if you want to get everything on YouTube all the time, but I don't foresee YouTube as a long-term solution to my desires for getting information out, and I think a lot of other people are feeling the same way. So I think YouTube's really shooting themselves in the foot. But honestly, I think what YouTube really is trying to do is just to become a major corporate platform. I don't really, I think it's very obvious, like independent content creators like myself and like many others are really getting pushed to the side, and the writing's on the wall. So this is what's happening. More and more you're going to see it. I like YouTube. I listen to music on YouTube. I listen to other various things on YouTube that I enjoy. And I am still going to be on YouTube, but again, as a long-term solution, I'm just not feeling love from YouTube. And I think a lot of other people are feeling the same way. So let me move to the next slide here. Oh, yes. So now I'm going to get into my next, I want to talk about the whole fourth stage of humanity idea that I have here. COVID is definitely moving us towards the whole microchip society. This is an article dealing with a DARPA-funded implantable biochip that we're told is here to detect, or designed to detect COVID-19 and put it to market by 2021. What the hell is this thing? Well, let's go take a look. This is very interesting. Again, I would encourage you to go look into this. I read this off of, I think, Zero Hedge, which I'm a pretty big fan of Zero Hedge. They have a lot of good news articles there. So about 10 years ago, there was a scientist who made a very significant breakthrough. And essentially, it was a way to reprogram your RNA, part of your DNA, to deal with a whole array of illnesses. And basically, what it seems to me, and I'm not an expert here, but it really looks like we're talking about bioengineering human beings to make them healthier and, hopefully get a lot of good results out of it. Obviously, when you talk about genetically modifying human beings, designer babies and everything else related to epigenetics and changing our gene structure and gene expression, there can be a number of very positive things that come out of it to make you healthier, to make you live longer, to shut off the aging, if they can figure that out one day, to reverse your aging process. Like all of these things actually are in the works, and on a personal level, it would be hard not to get excited if you had the opportunity to, go back to your 25-year-old body again. Like, who wouldn't want that? But there's other elements of it. So this guy's invention, there's a company called Profusa, which has gotten rights to use elements of this, and they are now in the COVID mix. And what they're doing is they've got this implantable chip that they are working on. And again, this is something that I would encourage you to go research on your own, where they are talking about the ability to insert their chips into human hosts as a way of helping to detect when you get COVID-19. In other words, you got little sensors in there, and when you get the illness, that triggers certain immunoresponses in your body that this chip will detect, and boom, a little light goes on. And this is all done with 5G technology, by the way. So it's all wireless transmission, and probably on your cell phone app, you get a little red alert, ding, 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 you now have COVID-19. And so that's, it's not hard to see that this is, in terms of dealing with a pandemic and getting immediate results that you can work with to kind of isolate infected people. Yeah, that works really well. That could be highly effective. The downside of that is simply that this technology, like we were just reading, this technology can absolutely be used to change the expression of your genetics itself. And this literally could be used, at least in theory, to screw with your own DNA. Now, my guess is right now there may be, that might be considered illegal to do that, which would be very nice, but the very fact that we're seeing this whole thing being rolled out now is really, really quite remarkable. So I don't have any more slides here I want to show you. There's a number of other things that COVID is doing that's really moving us into this new form of civilization. I mean, the whole social distancing and mask wearing in general, I think we have to say that it's creating a massive psychological reaction among people around the world. And, when you are conditioned by fear all the time, which is what has been happening throughout all of 2020, you really have to ask yourself, what next is coming down the road? Well, a couple of things are coming down the road. Like we've got an insane election that's less than 1 month away here in the United States, and so with an entire year of people just having the health scared out of them, and fear being ramped up on both sides of the political spectrum in the United States. You now have a situation in the U.S. where I think a third of the country on either political spectrum believes that violence will be justified in the event that their side loses the election. That was a poll that I just recently read. In general, I think what we can say relating to censorship, I just want to make this point before I get into, before I shift gears here. Sometimes, you hear people defending Facebook and Twitter censorship, or YouTube censorship. And the argument that you hear is, well, they're private corporations.
So it's true, like we have in the United States, there's the First Amendment, which protects your right to free speech. And that is an amendment that bars the United States government from censorship. And that has been a foundation, not simply of the United States political culture, but that's gone to, that's become something that the rest of the world has absolutely taken to heart. But what you have with Facebook and YouTube and Twitter primarily is that these private social media companies, they have, of course, they've given themselves broad discretion in removing content, and the legal foundation for them to do that is the 1996 Communications Decency Act, and something known as Section 230, which gives those companies legal protection as platforms and not as publishers. And so it allows them to remove objectionable material without defining it precisely. What you're seeing is a movement in the United States to have them classified as publishers, and so that they don't have a lot of the protections that they are enjoying. But essentially what you've got is that these private corporations are being used by the government apparatus, or deep state primarily, and there is a deep state, I used to call it national security state. They're the proxy for engaging in the wholesale censorship that intelligence communities, financial communities are constantly, hankering for. And so these massive monopolistic corporations are acting as censors, and it's definitely something that I think we really ought to all be concerned about. So, in fact, they're fulfilling the exact same role that the National Endowment for Democracy, the NED, has done ever since they were founded in the 1980s. In the old days, the CIA used to organize foreign coups all the time. And once they got enough bad press after Watergate, after Vietnam, after the United States Senate investigated intelligence community activities worldwide and discovered, good God, shock. The CIA actually tried to kill people. They actually tried to overthrow governments. How did we know? And so there was a blowback after that, and one of the main things that you saw in the aftermath is the creation of these NGOs, and the lead one, I think, was the NED, the National Endowment for Democracy, which to this day is basically the color revolution, regime change, folks that funnel money into other nations to destabilize them, to then implement the regime change that they want. I think it's a really strong argument to make that whole regime change model is really being worked on in the United States. So what the United States has created to send elsewhere is now being brought home to roost. I talked about this on my website if you're interested. I've got a whole presentation on that. So let me get into this idea that I've been working for now, something I call the fourth stage of humanity. Again, if you really want to get into the details of this, do check the link that I have below this box. It's a lecture that I gave on June 6th of this year, along with a lecture I gave on alien agendas, plural, and which was the first time that I ever really got into that whole theme as well. And in fact, I'm writing booklet, like 100-page booklet versions of those two lectures. So I'm writing a 100-page booklet on this thing I'm talking about tonight, and that's just about done. I'll have, actually, no, the alien agenda is just about done, excuse me, and then I'll have a booklet on this theme that I expect to have done hopefully in a month when I get these things out. And then I have a really neat interview I did with Alejandro Rojas, a journalist on the future of ufology, if you check that out. That's all in the link that's below here. So, what the heck is the fourth stage of humanity? Well, one thing that I like to do in my life, in addition to studying the UFO phenomenon, and in addition to studying contemporary geopolitics, is I like to look at the long view of human history. And this is something I've done my whole life. It's a funny thing, when I was growing up, back in the 70s, learning about the history of the human species, you would read about Cro-Magnon men, which, when I was a kid in like 1975, I read, well, scientists believe that, Cro-Magnon man, who was us, they're Homo sapiens sapiens, exactly the same as us, only existed as recently as 40,000 years ago. And the prevailing consensus back then was that that's how recent the human species was, 40,000 years. And over through the 1980s and 90s and into the 21st century, that number's been pushed back. Even just a few months ago, I thought it had been pushed back only to 250,000 years. Turns out that's short. So now the current number is, I believe, 315,000 years. So people like us, with our exact genetic structure, that could interbreed with us and so forth without a problem, have existed for more than 300,000 years. And that's all, of course, out of Africa. It wouldn't surprise me, and it probably wouldn't surprise you, if future discoveries push that number back even further. Because they go back to 500,000 years, that would be kind of amazing. Maybe it will happen. But right now we're at 300,000+ years, and that's quite amazing. And the reason it's amazing is because for nearly all of that time, human beings lived in one and only one way, only one form